There is a line in Satyajit Ray's Pratidwandi that echoes through the decades, a statement of fact, of exhaustion, and of an inescapable tragic love, where the character says, Calcutta, the city, is life. It is rotten life, but it is still life. The other places are all dead. Today is May 2nd, the birthday of the master, Satyajit Ray. To mark the occasion yesterday, we sat in the darkness of Nandan, an auditorium conceptualized and designed by Ray himself, housing one of the most majestic giant screens in the city, and we watched Pratidwandi, or The Adversary. We didn't just watch any print. This was the breathtaking newly restored format that premiered at Cannes Classics in 2022, arguably the absolute best version of the film that exists today. Seeing those stark, high-contrast black and white frames projected on a screen that Ray envisioned was nothing short of a pilgrimage.
So this was my first time watching this film, and of course, as Onarko said, what an honor to watch this in his 4K restored version. And we visited one of the talks of Shivendra Singh Dungarpur, who is one of the pioneers and the biggest advocate for film restoration and archiving. And he said that a film's true life is embedded in its grain, and it was so nice to see that the restoration quality of Pratidwandi was so high that you could literally see all the film grain on the screen as if it was shot yesterday.
And right before the screening, we were treated to a conversation that bridged the past and the present. The master's son, Sandip Ray, the iconic lead actor Dhritiman Chatterjee, and the brilliant Tinnu Anand, who assisted on this very set. Hearing them speak about the chaos of the late 60s and 70s brought the coasts of Calcutta right into the auditorium. Released in 1970, Pratidwandi is the first chapter of what would become known as Ray's Calcutta Trilogy. The film follows Siddhartha, a young man forced to drop out of medical college after the sudden death of his father. He is thrust into a sprawling, unforgiving metropolis called Calcutta, desperately hunting for a job. Surrounding him is a family representing the fractured psyche of the city. A sister whose ambition pushes her to compromise her morals, and a younger brother deeply entrenched in the Naxalite movement. Siddhartha is caught in the middle. He is not a revolutionary, but he is far from apathetic. He is a boiling pot of silent rage. The film meticulously tracks his humiliating journey from one dehumanizing job interview to another. He is asked absurd questions by men sitting in air-conditioned rooms, disconnected entirely from the burning streets outside. And this leads to arguably the most defining sequence of the film. When asked by an imposing interview panel, what is the most significant event of the last decade? Siddhartha famously replies, the war in Vietnam, not the moon landing. It is a moment of quiet, devastating brilliance. The interviewers are baffled, almost offended by thinking he is a communist. But to the corporate establishment, the moon landing is the absolute pinnacle of human achievement, a triumph of science, progress, and first world power. But to Siddhartha, standing in a city paralyzed by strikes, poverty, and political unrest, the moon landing is just a distant, sterile piece of technology. It means absolutely nothing to the starving or the oppressed. The Vietnam War, however, represents the extraordinary resilience of ordinary agrarian people fighting back against an impossibly powerful, mechanized superpower. It is the ultimate David and Goliath story. For a young man feeling entirely powerless against the crushing machinery of the system, that resilience is the only thing that gives him hope. Through this single piece of dialogue, Ray forces us to look at the priorities of human race, asking us why we celebrate conquering the stars when the earth is bleeding. Right after this conversation happens, the interviewer asks the very famous dialogue.
Are you a communist? I don't think one has to be one in order to admire Vietnam, sir.
Now, talking about this film, as I said, this was my first time watching it, and a big thing I noticed right off the start is that this feels very, very different from a typical Satyajit Ray film, But I couldn't really place why is that. But now in retrospect, I think I do understand it, that this is formally very different from what can be said as the classical filmmaking style of Satyajit Ray that is much talked about by critics. And he even talks about it in an interview which was provided to us in a booklet outside of the special screening, which is actually curated by Sandip Ray himself. So I would like to share this with you because I think it's very interesting that when Satyajit Ray was asked that why is this film's style and formatic structure so different from his previous works, he says, and I quote, "Since people have become used to a certain classical style in my films, I knew the criticism would come, but if it had been the work of an unknown director, the critics would have probably just accepted it. But I really don't care about the criticism, and maybe in 5 or 6 years when they see it in retrospect, they will find it's alright. And I wanted it to be apparent also in the style that this is my first political film, a different film from what I had done before, so let this be different."
Upon its release, Pratidwandi was instantly hailed as Ray's boldest film. And looking at it from a filmmaker's perspective today, it is easy to see why. Before this, Ray was known for his classical, humanist, neorealist narratives, inspired by Renoir or the Italian neorealism. But the Calcutta of 1970 could not be contained in a classical structure. The city was burning, and so Ray adapted his own cinematic language to match the anarchy of his environment. This is Ray at his most experimental, almost borrowing from the French New Wave but rooting it firmly in Bengali soil. He uses aggressive freeze frames, startling photonegative sequences, non-linear jumps, and surreal dreamscapes. He splices the narrative with raw documentary-style footages of political rallies and crowded trumps. The aesthetic is jarring because the reality of a jobless youth is jarring. The camera becomes restless. The editing snaps. It is a film that refuses to let the audience get uncomfortable because its protagonist is slowly suffocating in the city. Siddhartha's story doesn't exist in a vacuum. It is the beginning of a descent. If Pratidwandi is about the anger and frustration of unemployment, the second film, Shimabadha, in the Calcutta Trilogy, shows us the opposite end of the spectrum, the rot of corporate success, based on Moni Shankar's book. It asks, what piece of your soul do you sell? Climb the ladder, based on the very famous Dr. Faustus. And finally, John Arando, the middleman, drops us into absolute moral bankruptcy, where the struggle to survive forces a young man into the darkest, most cynical compromises imaginable. Together, the Calcutta Trilogy is a biopsy of a city losing its innocence. But why does Pratidwandi hit so hard today? Why were the young faces in Nandan yesterday staring at the screen with such profound recognition? Because the architecture of the crisis hasn't changed. We are still navigating a landscape defined by crippling joblessness. As said by the actor Dhritiman Chatterjee just before the screening, we are still suffering from unemployment in this city. We are still suffering from job crisis here. There are still issues with the border. There are still post-partition issues even after so many long years of partition. We are still caught in political crossfires, trying to figure out where to stand. The sheer exhaustion of sending out resumes or sitting in waiting room while a few men at the top hold all power. Siddhartha's quiet desperation is the exact same anxiety felt by students and the workers today. The technology has evolved, but the existential dread remained exactly the same. Okay, so speaking of mild spoilers, at the end of Pratidwandi, Siddhartha is exiled to a small quiet town. He finally hears the bird he had been searching for amidst the noise of the city. He has escaped, but it feels like a defeat. Because as the film reminds us, Calcutta is where the blood flows. It is a city that breaks you, exhausts you, and forces you to confront the harshest realities of existence. It is a rotten life, yes, but the sheer pulse of its youth, the anger in its streets, the art that is born from its chaos. It is undeniably, aggressively alive. Calcutta, the city that gave birth to Satyajit Ray.
Renoir told me, why don't you make a film if you're so interested? Why don't you give up what you're doing and go into filmmaking? I said, well, I have an idea to make this kind of a film, and I described the story. He said, do it. It sounds marvelous.